The last time I took a look at the CX-5, I was very torn. I think this is one of the best looking compact crossovers regardless of segment. That would include the luxury and near luxury segment. However, there were some serious flaws with the previous generation model. The biggest one of them was the fact that the infotainment and navigation system was decidedly dowdy. It was definitely old school, it was slow. In fact, it was my least favorite infotainment system, period. For 2016, that has all changed. Of course, Mazda didn't really change the looks of the CX-5, which is excellent because this is still one of the most attractive compact crossovers available. I actually find it interesting that Mazda's design language translates so well from sedans to crossovers like this because a lot of corporate designs don't. Big changes for 2016 are that we now have dynamic steering LED headlamps available, and our particular model has them. These are some of the best headlamps in this segment, and I actually rank them decently above the average HID headlamp in the luxury segment as well. Bundled with those LED headlamps are LED fog lamps and full LED tail lamps. The side profile is also undeniably attractive and slightly reminiscent of BMW's latest crossovers, which I think is a very good look. We have this profile that looks like it slopes a little bit towards the rear, but actually it's somewhat of an optical illusion because headroom in the back is fairly generous in this model, but the window line definitely drops down and then rises up right back here as well. Unfortunately, as is typical with sexy side profiles, there is a loss of practicality in the back because we do get this sloping rear glass, which means that we get less cargo room back here than you'll find in many of the mainline compact two-row crossovers. Out back, we get the same sort of styling cues we also see in the Mazda 6 with these sort of angry-looking tail lamps. Again, in our particular model, these are full LED tail lamps. We have the strip that runs across from the side all the way to the back, and overall the styling is very nicely done. It's aggressive without being too overdone. Our particular model has dual exhaust tips, which also help add to the look. This particular CX-5 has the optional adaptive cruise control system, so we find a radar sensor right there behind the Mazda logo. And because we have the lane departure warning system and the collision mitigation system in this vehicle, you'll find a bevy of sensors right here behind the windscreen glass. This system operates very similarly to what we saw out of Volvo in their pre-2016 models. So at speeds you'd find in the city, there are cameras that monitor the traffic in front of you, and it will attempt to mitigate an accident if it deems one unavoidable. We also have a lane departure warning system, but no lane keeping assistance system like you will find in some Subaru models for the 2016 model year. Under the hood, there are two different engines. The base CX-5, which does cost less than most of the entries in this segment, gets by with a 2-liter 4-cylinder engine that's a decent amount less powerful than the other entries in this segment. That engine is mated only to a 6-speed manual transmission. If you want to row your own gears, that is the only way you can do it. Because if you bump up to this 184 horsepower 2.5-liter 4-cylinder engine, then the automatic transmission is the only transmission you can get. Some reviewers out there are a little bit confused about the Mazda 6-speed Skyactiv automatic transmission. It is not a dual clutch transmission. Instead, it is an automatic transmission that has a very aggressive torque converter lockup function to it. That means this is just as smooth as every other automatic out there. However, when you're driving the car hard, it has a more direct feel like a dual clutch transmission or a manual transmission because the torque converter is locked up. We're told that the average automatic transmission spends 20 to 40% of its time in lockup, and this transmission will spend up to 80% of its time in lockup. Fuel economy is absolutely excellent if you get that 2-liter 4-cylinder engine and the 6-speed manual, but of course 0 to 60 times will suffer. But the best thing to know is that this particular model will still get 33 miles per gallon out on the highway, 30 miles per gallon out on the highway if you opt for the optional all-wheel drive system. I'm going to give front seat comfort 8 out of 10 points. These seats are quite comfortable and they do have a 2-way adjustable lumbar support, but I don't find them quite as comfortable as the seats in the current generation Honda CR-V. A lot of that has to do with the positioning of the lumbar support in these seats. Now we do have more aggressive side bolstering than we find in the rest of the competition, which I personally really liked, but larger people may have a little bit of an issue with. It really helps keep you planted in these seats, which is a good thing since the CX-5 does handle better than almost every other entry in this segment. We also have a tilt telescopic steering column with a large range of motion, although unfortunately even in our touring model, the passenger seat does not have the same range of motion and is not power adjustable like the driver's seat. When it comes to rear seat accommodations, I'm going to give this 9 out of 10 points, largely because we have an absolutely excellent amount of headroom. I have about 2 inches left, even though we are in the model with the optional sunroof. Now that surprised me because by the exterior profile of the CX-5, I did assume that there would be a little bit less headroom back here. If I move on over to the middle seat, the hump is a very reasonable hump right there. The middle seat is placed a little bit in front of and a little bit above the outboard seats, but I still have about 1.5 inches of headroom. And if I move all the way over to the right side of the vehicle, this front seat is all the way back in its tracks. I still have about 1 inch of legroom left there. Now, one word of warning, I wasn't able to fit a child seat in a rearward facing position behind myself at 6 feet tall in the front seat. If you want to know more about that, go ahead and check out the child seat video. Rear seat passengers get a softly padded center armrest with 2 fixed cup holders, and we get a very handy novelty back here, which is a 40-20-40 folding rear seat back. This is quite rare in the mass market segment. You usually only find this in the luxury segment. It does mean that you can easily put a child seat or a person in each outboard seat and then put long items from IKEA right here in the middle. Now, the center section is tied to this 40% side right behind the driver. So if you want to fold this side, you do have to fold the middle seat right along with it. It folds almost completely flat with the cargo area, and the seat bottom cushion articulates so you don't have to flip and fold that, although I did have to remove the headrest. Although the cargo cover in the back is optional, I highly recommend it because this is quite unique. It actually attaches to the hatchback itself. This is the cargo cover, so rather than being a roller shade style that locks into place right here, it actually attaches right there. That means it comes up and out of the way whenever you open the hatch rather than having to open it separately. It's a really thoughtful touch. The CX-5 is full of thoughtful touches. We actually have some storage wells on either side of this carpeted mat. More surprising than that, however, the rear seats again fold in that interesting 40-20-40 folding fashion, and we can do that from the middle or from the rear, right here with 2 different levers. That's for the middle seat, and that is for the outboard seat. Although the cargo area is a hair more compact than some of the entries in this segment and a hair less practical because of the sloping rear glass, I'm going to give this 9 out of 10 points because we have these really practical and convenient features back here, like the ability to fold that 20% section from the cargo area or from the inside of the vehicle, or to fold all the seats from either the cargo area or from inside the vehicle. We have a 12-volt power outlet, some additional storage space, a compact spare tire, this tonneau cover that moves with the hatch, which again I really love, and a convenient handle to help you close the lid. Our top-end Grand Touring model has this very attractive 2-tone leather interior. You can see it's sort of an ivory and charcoal theme. We have 2-way adjustable headrests and height-adjustable seat belts for both the driver and the front passenger. Although these leather seats are not ventilated, they are perforated. The 2-tone scheme is very obvious over here on the front doors. We have a lot of soft touch plastics going on the top part of the door at this center ivory section, as well as a very softly padded armrest. You'll find hard touch plastics lower in the door in that little storage bin. Over on the dashboard, we have a somewhat rubbery, soft touch injection molded dashboard. We have this trim strip that runs all the way across the dashboard. Then we have a moderately sized glove compartment. I was able to fit a tablet computer inside there, as well as a number of other items. Over in the center of the dashboard, we have a center channel speaker in our particular model, and then nestled right into the dashboard, we have the biggest change for the 2016 model year. We have the Mazda Connect infotainment and navigation system essentially borrowed out of the Mazda 3. That was the first vehicle we saw this particular system in, and it is a huge change for the CX-5. The last generation infotainment system in the CX-5 was definitely lackluster. It was slow. I actually found it to be one of the least attractive and least functional infotainment systems available in a modern vehicle. But for 2016, Mazda has changed that incredibly, and they've actually given us one of the best systems available in a mass market vehicle now. This also goes for the Mazda 6, and the brand new Mazda MX-5 will also be getting this particular system. This particular system is a combination touchscreen and controller dial system. If you want to know more about this, go ahead and click that banner at the bottom of your screen. You'll be taken on over to our detailed review of this system in the 2014 Mazda 3. Now, zooming back out, you'll notice that Mazda did not alter the dashboard at all. So this does not stick up off the dashboard like you see in the Mazda 2 in some world markets, or the Mazda 3 or some other Mazda models. This is instead integrated right into basically the same dashboard shape that the CX-5 had before. The only downside to the USB port being located there is that it does seem a little bit messy with your cords hanging out all over the place. We have a very standard console shifter, down for drive, over to the left for the manual mode, down for up, and up for down. That is a little bit different than some of those cars out there, but I'm told that's supposed to be more logical like race cars. We have our sport drive mode select button here. We can choose between normal and sport mode. And then for 2016, we also get some additional changes to the center console. We have an electric parking brake button right over here. And then we have the controls for that Mazda Connect infotainment system. This is a iDrive-like rotary knob, so it toggles up, down, side to side, clicks down to enter, and rotates around. We also have a back button, a favorite button, nav button, home button, and media button. You'll find the volume control knob right over here like you find in Audi's MMI. Behind the Mazda Connect controls, we have some additional storage cubbies. You can put a wallet right in that one. We have 2 very large cup holders right over here. very easily able to accommodate large takeout drinks. And behind that, we have a very softly padded center armrest that is shaped to cut out for that cup holder. If we open that up, we have a very large and very deep center console. You can see I have all kinds of stuff jammed in there very easily. Over on the driver's side, we have a sporty looking 2-dial instrument cluster. We have 2 physical dials, one for the tachometer over here, one for the speedometer right there in the middle. And then everything we're seeing over here on the right side of the screen is actually an LCD in our particular model. That LCD is controlled via this info button right here on the steering wheel, and it also displays information regarding the optional radar cruise control system that our particular model has. Zooming in on the screen, you can see that the bottom portion of the LCD is giving us our fuel gauge, and then we can cycle through things like our trip computer with our current and average fuel economy, average speed, as well as our distance to empty and a display of our safety systems. So it shows us the distance for your warning system. That's where the car tells you you're following too closely. Also tells us our status of our lane departure warning system and the radar cruise control if we had it enabled. You should know this is not a full speed range radar cruise control system like we find in some of the models in this segment, most notably the current generation Subaru EyeSight system. The steering wheel is very similar to what we see in other Mazda models. We have an awful lot of buttons going on, dedicated track forward, backward buttons, info button right here for that multi-information display, volume up, down, voice command, and dedicated phone hang-up pickup buttons. On the right side of the steering wheel, we get our radar cruise control buttons, on, off, distance, set speed, and of course cancel and resume. You'll notice that we don't have any shift paddles on the back of the steering wheel, however. To the right side of the steering wheel, we have some additional buttons for our traction control system, our tire pressure warning system, blind spot monitoring, lane departure warning, etc. And then we have a very strangely shaped little storage cubby right there. You really can't put much in there, and an iPhone 6 barely fits right that, and that's as far back as it will go. It's very shallow. Compact crossovers still carry the veil of off-road ability, and on roads like this, which is a gravel paved road, you can see that the CX-5 suspension is a little bit stiffer than the rest of the competition, most notably something like the RAV4 or the CR-V, which are fairly soft. However, it's not unpleasant at all even on this road right here. This does still provide a very polished ride because the suspension is very well designed in the CX-5. Personally, I prefer a slightly sportier ride as long as it's not punishing, and that's exactly what the CX-5 delivers. Of course, I'll give my usual caveat that if you live down roads like this, especially in inclement weather, you're really going to want the all-wheel drive system because it will seriously improve traction. Out on the road, it's important to understand the CX-5 is an excellent handling vehicle, but it's not a particularly fast vehicle. 0 to 60 happens in 7.7 seconds, which is fairly respectable for a 4-cylinder entry in this segment, but the competition does offer things like V6 engines or turbocharged engines, which are going to be faster. Thanks to the light curb weight, the tire choices, as well as the suspension design, braking is excellent in the CX-5, and braking distances are shorter than most of the competition. When it comes to handling, however, that's really where the CX-5 starts to shine, because this platform is very, very well designed. This feels like a slightly taller Mazda 3, which is to say the steering feel, the sharpness of the suspension, everything is just really working very well together. Even in this front-wheel drive model, it feels like you can drive the CX-5 harder than most of the all-wheel drive competition. Tip and dive as well as body roll are very, very well controlled in the CX-5, and this actually reminds me an awful lot of a Mini Cooper, if I'm honest. It has that same kind of small car chuckable feel, even though we are in a compact crossover. Now, you'd normally think that driving dynamics like that would take a big toll on the ride, but actually the ride is fairly well composed in the CX-5, especially for on-road duty. When it comes to off-road duty, things are a little bit stiffer than I would like for an off-road vehicle, but the modern crossover really isn't a true off-road vehicle. Fuel economy is excellent for this segment. I've been averaging 29.1 miles per gallon in mixed driving in this front-wheel drive automatic transmission model. That's very good for a crossover, but it's also very good for any kind of midsize or compact sedan. This is actually slightly better fuel economy than you get in a 4-cylinder Toyota Camry or a wide variety of other 4-cylinder mid-size sedans, even though this is a compact crossover, which is much less aerodynamic. Mazda's 6-speed automatic transmission is a very willing partner out on the road. It's very eager to upshift and very eager to downshift both, for both fuel economy as well as performance. The interesting thing about this 6-speed automatic transmission is that it has a torque converter lockup feature that is very, very aggressive, so it spends an awful lot more time in lockup. It makes the drivetrain feel more direct and more responsive, a little bit more like a dual clutch transmission or a manual transmission without the worries of those dual clutch reliability statistics. If I had to pick a crossover for my favorite winding mountain road, this really would be at the top of the list. Volkswagen's Touareg and Ford's Escape do handle very well, and they have those fun turbocharged engines, but this handles so much better that I really don't care about how fast it is in a straight line. And it's not just the handling ability, but it's also the handling feel. Even though this has electric power steering, just like everything else out there, there's a lot more handling feel going on through this steering wheel than any of the other options in this segment. This is probably the most fun you can have in a crossover under about $40,000 or so. Well, there are other entries out there that are smaller than this that handle excellently, like Mazda's own CX-3 or certain versions of the Nissan Juke. This has an incredibly well-sorted feel, and it's a decent size as well. Now we must talk about the one fly in the CX-5's ointment, and that is cabin noise. More specifically, engine noise in the cabin, because when you're driving the car hard, or actually just when idling, you can hear more engine noise in this cabin than a wide variety of the competition. Road noise is well controlled and wind noise is well controlled, but the engine noise does come across quite heavy. I'm not exactly sure the reason for that. It could be the design of the Skyactiv intake manifold and its close position to the firewall in the vehicle, but Mazda tells us that they have added some additional sound insulation to the 2016 model. It has helped a hair, but under hard acceleration this is a little bit louder than your average entry in this segment. In neutral driving at 50 miles an hour on my favorite road, it did come in right around average at 70 decibels, but under hard acceleration, it's about 2 to 3 decibels louder than everybody else. The real downside to that, of course, is that you can drive the CX-5 so much harder than any of the competition that you're going to hear that engine noise an awful lot more often than in any of the competitors, because this is just so much more fun out on the road. Keeping in mind that the CX-5 competes with the RAV4 and the CR-V, not those entry-level, smaller crossovers like the HR-V or the Chevy Trax, this is one of the least expensive vehicles in its category in this country. It starts at $21,795 for that base sport model. Now you should know that base sport model, of course, gets the 6-speed manual transmission and the less powerful 2-liter 4-cylinder engine. If you want an automatic transmission in your base model, the price does jump rather drastically to $23,195. That's because that model also gets the 2.5-liter 4-cylinder engine, which is of course more powerful. However, that is still less expensive than the RAV4 and the CR-V and only a hair more than the Nissan Rogue. Ford's Escape at $22,960 is the least expensive vehicle in this segment with similar performance. Unfortunately, Mazda shoppers have to decide between the fun of the manual transmission and the extra power you get out of that up-level 2.5-liter engine. Now you should know that base CX-5 models do not get the Mazda Connect infotainment system. If you want that, it is a $400 option, and it will raise the price up to $23,595 because you also have to have the automatic transmission. Now navigation is not standard with that system, but you can add it aftermarket. You can just visit your Mazda dealer and you can do that at any time, we're told. The model we've been looking at is a fully loaded front-wheel drive version, but if you want a fully loaded all-wheel drive version, that does top out at $33,655 for the Grand Touring model with the red paint and all the options. The Alex and Autos tip is that if you're looking at the top-end Grand Touring model, I advise going all the way and getting those two options because the LED headlamps are really excellent in this particular vehicle. They also steer. They're by far the best headlamps in this segment, and they're better than most entries in the next category up, which would be a near luxury compact crossover. The $1,500 optional radar cruise control system also brings with it lane departure warning and navigation. The only downside there is it is not full speed range radar cruise control like the Subaru systems, so it won't take you to a complete stop. Versus Toyota's RAV4, the CX-5 does start a little bit less. Depending on the options you get, it's either about the same price or a little bit more expensive depending on the model. In addition, the RAV4 does not handle or feel nearly as lively out on the road. That really goes for every other entry in this segment. Honda's CR-V is a little bit more comfortable inside, and the latest infotainment system in the CR-V is very nicely done, but I think that the Mazda Connect system is just a hair above that Honda system, and of course this handles much better than the CR-V. There have been a few complaints about vibration in the CR-V. There haven't been any in this particular vehicle, although the CR-V is a little bit quieter. Ford's Escape has a very European feel, but interestingly enough, it still lags behind the CX-5 when it comes to handling and handling feel out on the road, largely because the Ford Escape is heavier than this and it is noticeable out on the road. The steering feel also is not as sorted as we get here. We get more feedback, more road feel in the Mazda. Nissan's Rogue is comfortable. It's one of the best values in this segment, and it also gets excellent fuel economy, higher than the CX-5 model we've been testing here in our own driving, but it comes on the practical side of my favorite list, not the emotional side. And the CX-5 definitely is that kind of vehicle that's just fun to drive out on the road. Every time I've been behind the wheel in this car, I've been smiling. It's a blast to drive out on your favorite winding mountain road. It's unusual for any crossover to have handling limits that are so easy to find. It's easy to know exactly what the tires are doing in this car. It's easy to bring this car right up to its limits. Not that I recommend doing that in a crossover all the time, but this is the crossover that you can do that in, and you can't do that in the Rogue or the RAV4 or the CR-V. Interestingly enough, the CX-5 is also an excellent value when you start taking a look at the fully loaded model. This is about $2,000 less than a similarly equipped Ford Escape and about $7,000 less than a Volkswagen Tiguan. The Volkswagen Tiguan is an excellently handling small crossover, but it has a heavier, more dramatic feel to it. This is lighter and more nimble feeling, and it's significantly less expensive. This also compares very well to the Lexus NX200T. It is considerably less expensive than the Lexus. I think it actually handles and feels better than the Lexus as well. The Lexus is a little bit faster out on the road, but you don't really get that many more luxury features over there with the Lexus. My bottom line is that the CX-5 is my absolute favorite vehicle in the compact crossover segment, and that would even include something like that Lexus NX200T. Unless you need more room on the inside, go ahead and stop at the Mazda dealer. You won't be sorry. Thanks for taking the time to check out this video. Again, I'm Alex Dykes. This has been the 2016 Mazda CX-5. Go ahead and click down there on those related videos at the bottom of your screen. Find me over at Facebook and over at Twitter, and I'll see you next week.